December 28th, 1964. A cold, slate-gray afternoon in Garfield Heights, Ohio. The kind of day where nothing happens, until it does. At 3:15 p.m., 16-year-old Beverly Giroux steps into her family's quiet suburban home. School's out for winter break. Her parents are at work. Her sister's running errands. The house is still, just the hum of the furnace, the creak of floorboards. 15 minutes later, Beverly is dead. Not just dead, brutalized. A knife, a garrote, a violence so extreme, even the medical examiner, a man who'd survived the battlefields of World War II and cataloged the horrors of the Cleveland torso murders, would call it the worst thing he'd ever seen. The killer? Gone. Vanished into the icy streets. No screams heard. No fingerprints left. Just a handful of clues that don't add up. A diary that disappeared. A neighbor who saw something, but said nothing. For 60 years, this case has been a wound. A question carved into Cleveland's bones. Was it a stranger? A friend? A predator hiding in plain sight? The truth died with Beverly that day. Or did it? Beverly Giroux wasn't just a name in a dusty police file. Let's talk about her. Picture a girl with a crooked smile and a head full of dreams. A straight-A student who'd sneak peeks at 17 magazine between homework assignments. A teenager who spent her weekends babysitting the neighborhood kids. The responsible one, her mom called her. She loved ice skating at the rink on Libby Road, spinning under twinkling lights to Frankie Valli's Big Girls Don't Cry. She hated math tests, soggy cafeteria sandwiches, and the way snow ruined her hair on walk-home days. Beverly was, in other words, just a kid. But on December 28, 1964, her ordinary life became a riddle. Why her? Why that house? Why 3:15 p.m.? The answer's etched in rage. This wasn't some stranger prowling the suburbs. No, the killer knew her schedule. Knew her family would be gone. Knew exactly how to slip inside without a sound. They brought tools, a knife sharp enough to slice through bone, a garrote wired for savagery. But this wasn't just murder. It was hatred. Personal, intimate, familiar. Maybe it was the way Beverly laughed too loudly at jokes. Maybe it was the boy she turned down at the homecoming dance. Maybe it was the secret she scribbled in that little blue diary of hers, the one that vanished from her bedroom that afternoon. But here's what we do know. Beverly's crime was being 16 years old, home alone on a snowy Tuesday, and trusting that her quiet street was safe. And 60 years later, her killer's crime? They turned a girl with a name, a face, and a future into a ghost. The house looked normal from the street. Christmas lights still twinkling on the porch. A shoveled sidewalk. Curtains drawn tight. But inside, police would later say it felt off, like walking into a play frozen mid-act. Furniture shoved out of place. A lamp glowing in broad daylight. Beverly's body, positioned deliberately at the foot of the stairs, as if the killer wanted her to be found just so. But the details: a dining room chair dragged into the hallway. A pair of scissors left on the kitchen counter. The thermostat cranked to sweltering, as if to mock the freezing world outside. And then there was Beverly. A medical examiner doesn't flinch. Not after Okinawa. Not after the torso murders, those headless, limbless corpses dumped in Cleveland's gutters like trash. But when Dr. Lester Adelson knelt beside her body, he froze. 60 years later, his words still hang in the air. The most horrifying scene I've ever witnessed. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was theater. The killer didn't just stab her, didn't just strangle her. They curated, rearranged the living room like a stage, closed the curtains to dim the lights, left the front door unlocked, as if inviting an audience. And Beverly? She was the star. But here's the question that still keeps detectives awake. Why? Was this a message? A ritual? Or was the killer savoring the horror, lingering in that house long enough to scrub every trace of themselves away? Because they did. No fingerprints. No murder weapon. Just a single palm print on the basement door, too smudged to matter. The only thing they left behind, a lesson: monsters don't hide in shadows. They rearrange the furniture. They tidy up. They make sure you remember their work, long after they've gone. The killer was a ghost. Or maybe they were hiding in plain sight. Because in Garfield Heights, everyone knew everyone, and no one knew a thing. Let's start with the boyfriend. Tom Sweeney, 17 years old. Football star. The kind of kid who charmed parents but left classmates uneasy. He swore he was at the bowling alley that afternoon. But witnesses? Their stories wobbled. Yeah, maybe we saw him. Maybe we didn't. And when police pressed him, Tom's alibi crumbled like wet paper. But without evidence, without a motive, he walked. Then there was the neighbor. An elderly woman across the street claimed she saw a man sprinting from Beverly's house at 3:25 p.m. Blue jacket, dark hair, panicked. But when detectives knocked on every door, neighbors shrugged. Didn't see a thing. Wouldn't say a thing. Even the witness herself, a retired schoolteacher with a spotless reputation, changed her story. Maybe it was just a dog, she whispered later. Maybe I imagined it. But the most chilling suspect? The man in black. A figure neighbors reported lingering near Beverly Street for weeks. Tall, thin, always in a long coat, even in the snow. A stranger who vanished after the murder. Was he a drifter? A predator casing the suburbs? Or just a phantom conjured by fear? And then, the drifter. 3 days after the murder, police arrested a hitchhiker named Carl Miller near Akron. His pants stained with what looked like blood. His eyes wild, his hands scratched. But when the lab tests came back, inconclusive. Carl swore he'd gutted a rabbit for dinner. No proof, no history, just another dead end. But here's the truth. In a town like Garfield Heights, secrets stick. Families protect their own. Cops hit walls. And a killer? They don't need to run. They just need to blend in. Because 60 years later, the answer might still be here. Hiding behind a familiar face. A name etched on a local gravestone. A story everyone knows, but no one dares tell. The killer left behind a trail of breadcrumbs. But every crumb was a lie. Let's start with the evidence. A single palm print on the basement door. Smudged. Incomplete. Useless. Detectives spent weeks fingerprinting every man in Garfield Heights. Neighbors, teachers, delivery boys. Hundreds of hands pressed to ink. Hundreds of dead ends. Then there were the footprints. Fresh snow had fallen that morning. Perfect, pristine powder. And there they were. A set of muddy boot prints leading from Beverly's back door to the edge of the woods. Size 10.5. Tread like a workman's boot. Police followed them for half a mile, until the trail vanished at the edge of Mill Creek. And in that creek, they found a pocket knife. Rusty. Cheap. The kind you could buy at any hardware store in Ohio. No blood. No fingerprints. Just a blade, tossed into the water like trash. Was it the murder weapon? Or just another cruel joke? But the biggest clue wasn't a thing. It was a sentence. Beverly's last words to her sister, Jean, hours before she died. If anything happens to me, look in my diary. A diary. Small. Blue. Locked with a tiny key she kept on a necklace. Inside, pages filled with the secrets of a 16-year-old girl. Crushes, fears, maybe even a name. His name. But when police searched Beverly's room, the diary was gone. Vanished. Like it never existed. Her sister swore Beverly carried it everywhere. Her mother swore she saw it on the kitchen table that morning. But after 3:30 p.m., gone. Was it stolen by the killer? Hidden by someone afraid of its truth? Or did it simply disappear into the air like smoke? Here's what we know. The palm print? Lost to time. The boots? Never found. The knife? Sitting in an evidence locker until 1972, then tossed into a landfill. And the diary? A ghost. But let's play this out. If the diary held a secret, say, a boy harassing her, a teacher acting strange, a stranger watching her walk home, then whoever took it knew exactly what Beverly had written, which means they knew her. They were close enough to fear her words. Or maybe the diary meant nothing. Maybe Beverly's last words were just a teenage girl's drama. A sister's guilt twisting a throwaway comment into a clue. But here's the problem with dead ends. They haunt you. Detectives re-interviewed Jean a dozen times. What did she mean? Did Beverly seem scared? Who would she tell? Jean's answer never changed. She was just Beverly. She didn't act afraid. She acted like someone who knew. Knew what? And then there's the neighbor. The one who told police years later that she saw a man walking away from Beverly's house that afternoon. He had something small and blue in his hand. But when detectives tracked her down in 1988, she refused to talk. I was mistaken, she said. It was a different day. A coincidence? Or a lie? Even the palm print, that smudged, stubborn clue, came back to taunt them. In 2001, a cold case team ran it through new software. No match, just pixels on a screen. And the boots? A retired detective wrote in his memoir. We found a pair in a suspect's basement. Size 10.5. Tread matched. But his alibi was airtight. Or was it? He died before he could say more. So here we are. 60 years later, the clues haven't aged. They haven't faded. They've just frozen. The palm print, a silent hand reaching out from 1964. The diary, a question mark carved into the case. The knife, a blade without a wound. And the footprints, melted away. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the killer wanted us to think they left clues, wanted us to chase shadows, to waste decades on red herrings and rabbit holes. Because the real clue, the one that matters, isn't in a lab or a landfill. It's in Beverly's last words. Look in my diary. A girl's final plea. A sister's lifelong regret. A secret that died with a key in a lock. So I'll ask you this. If the diary ever surfaces, would you open it? Or are some secrets better left buried? Let's cut through the noise. Let's talk about truth. 60 years. 1,000 theories. But only 3 matter. Theory 1, the boy next door. Start with the obvious. Someone Beverly knew. Someone she trusted. A classmate. A friend. A boy who couldn't take no for an answer. Maybe Tom Sweeney, the boyfriend with the crumbling alibi. Or the quiet kid who sat behind her in algebra, scribbling her name in the margins of his notebook. Police loved this theory. It made sense. The killer knew her routine, knew the house, knew how to avoid leaving evidence. But here's the problem. If it was someone she knew, why the rage? The overkill? The staging? You don't strangle your crush with a garrote. You don't rearrange furniture to send a message to your algebra partner. Unless it wasn't about Beverly. Unless it was about power. Theory 2, the monster passing through. A drifter. A truck driver. A serial killer testing his tools before moving on. Cleveland was no stranger to monsters. The torso murderer butchered 12 people in the 1930s. Maybe Beverly was victim 13. A warm-up act. A predator's experiment. The evidence? The brutality. The lack of connection. The way the killer vanished like smoke. And that man in black, neighbors reported? A shadow without a face. A perfect ghost. But here's the catch. Serial killers don't usually stalk suburbs. They hunt in alleys, in bus stations, in places where screams get drowned out. Beverly's murder was personal, calculated, a performance. Which brings us to Theory 3, the secret. What if Beverly knew something? What if that little blue diary wasn't just filled with crushes and homework complaints? What if she saw something, heard something? A teacher's affair, a parent's crime, a secret worth killing to keep buried. Think about it. The killer takes the diary, not the jewelry, not the cash, just the diary. Then they stage the scene, not to scare, but to distract. To make it look like the work of a madman, not a cover-up. And the town, Garfield Heights, played its part. Neighbors clammed up. Witnesses forgot. Even the police, did they really try? Or did they follow leads just enough to say they tried, then let the snow bury the rest? But let's get real. Let's get dark. What if Beverly's killer wasn't a stranger? Wasn't a drifter? What if it was someone nobody dared suspect? A pillar of the community. A cop. A pastor. A father. Someone with everything to lose. Because here's the truth the file won't tell you. The best killers aren't the ones who hide. They're the ones we refuse to see. The police leaned toward Theory 1. The evidence whispered Theory 2. But the longer this case goes unsolved, the louder Theory 3 screams. Because this wasn't just a murder. It was a lesson. The killer didn't just want Beverly dead. They wanted her erased. Her story rewritten. Her truth locked away with that diary. And they got exactly what they wanted. But here's what they didn't count on. Us. The ones still digging. Still asking. Still piecing together the fragments they left behind. So let's circle back to the question. What really happened to Beverly Jarose? Was it a boy? A monster? A secret? Or is the answer simpler and worse? Maybe Beverly's killer is still here. In Garfield Heights. An old man now. Grandkids on his knee. Smiling at Beverly's memorial every December. Laughing at the world that never figured it out. Because that's the thing about secrets. They don't stay buried. They rot. They stink. And sooner or later, someone smells the truth. Time moves on, but some stories refuse to let go. Beverly Jarose's house still stands on Gasoline Alley. Same red bricks. Same front porch. New owners, of course. They've repainted the shutters. Replaced the mailbox. But if you walk past it on a winter afternoon, when the light slants low and the streets go quiet, you'll feel it, the weight. The echo of a girl who never got to leave. Her classmates are grandparents now. They meet every 5 years for reunions, laughing over yearbooks and cafeteria scandals. But when Beverly's name comes up, the room stills. She'd have been a teacher, someone says, or a nurse. She loved helping people. Then the conversation shifts. Always shifts. Because grief has no expiration date. And every December 28th, like clockwork, flowers appear on the sidewalk outside her old home. Carnations, roses, sometimes just a single daisy tied with a ribbon. No note, no name, just a reminder. But here's what they're really saying: we haven't forgotten. We're still here. And so are you. The police files? Dusty. The detectives? Retired. Or dead. The evidence? Boxed up, buried in some storage room under flickering fluorescent lights. But the questions? Those never closed. They drift through Garfield Heights like winter fog. Why does this case cling to us? Because it's not just about Beverly. It's about the lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night. That suburbs are safe. That monsters don't smile at you in the grocery store. That justice always wins. Beverly's murder cracks that illusion open. It whispers, you don't know your neighbors. You never did. The truth is trapped, squeezed between a community's silence and a killer's pride. Because someone out there knows. Maybe a wife who smelled blood on her husband's coat that night. A friend who helped wash mud off a pair of size 10.5 boots. A priest who heard a confession too dark to repeat. They've carried this secret for 60 years. Let it rot in their guts. Let it twist their lives into knots. Why? Fear? Loyalty? Or the cruel thrill of getting away with it? And what about the killer? If they're alive, they're old now. Watching true crime shows about their own crime. Scanning headlines for Beverly's name. Maybe they even leave those flowers themselves, a sick game, a way to taste the grief they created. Or maybe they're dead, buried under a fake name, their truth rotting with them. But here's the thing about rot. It seeps. It seeps into the family who never got to see Beverly grow up, into the cop who drank himself to retirement, muttering about palm prints and blue diaries, into the town that still locks its doors a little faster when the snow falls. So why won't this case die? Because it's not a case. It's a ghost. Beverly's ghost. She's in the way old men stare too long at teenage girls skating at Libby Rink. In the way mothers check windows twice before bed. In the way Garfield Heights holds its breath every December, waiting for a confession that never comes. But ghosts don't speak. Not unless we let them. All it takes is one person. One sentence. I know what happened. Until then, Beverly stays frozen. 16 forever. Forever on the cusp of a truth she almost told. So we wait, and we wonder. When the last person who remembers her dies, will the story die too? Or will that little blue diary someday tumble out of an attic box? Pages brittle but words still screaming? Here's the answer. As long as someone still asks why. Beverly Jarose isn't gone. She's just waiting. 60 years. 6 decades. 21,900 days. That's how long Beverly Jarose's killer has walked free. Breathed free. Lived free. They're not a ghost. Ghosts haunt places, houses, graves, the corners of old photos. No, this killer is something worse. A shadow. The kind that clings to people. To families. To this town. A shadow with a name. A name their neighbors might have spoken over coffee. A name their kids might have played catch with. A name that's carved into park benches, church pews, or maybe even a headstone. But here's what keeps me awake. We know. Somebody knows. A wife. A sibling. A best friend who helped bury a secret in 1964 and let it grow thorns. They've spent 60 years swallowing the truth, choking on it, pretending it doesn't taste like blood. Why? Because the killer's still here. In plain sight. A grandparent now. A war hero. A volunteer at the food bank. Someone you'd never suspect, unless you really looked. Or because the killer's dead, but their lie lives on. Passed down like an heirloom. A family secret too ugly to confess. So let me ask you this. Who do you think did it? Was it the boyfriend? The drifter? The man in black? Or someone the police never even wrote down? And why are we still whispering about it? Is it fear? Not of the killer, but of what we'd lose if the truth came out. A reputation. A legacy. A life built on lies. Or is it shame? Shame that we let a girl's murder become a footnote. That we traded justice for silence. That we left Beverly's story unfinished because it was easier, safer, cleaner? Here's the truth. Every time someone says, let it go. Every time the case is called too old to solve. Every time a flower is left on that sidewalk without a note. The killer wins. Again, and again, and again. So I'll say what Garfield Heights won't. Your name is out there. In a diary. In a confession letter. In the memories of someone too scared to speak. It's only a matter of time. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. Tick. So look around you. That shadow in the corner of your screen? It's not just static. It's a name, and it's been here the whole time.